I claimed I was a victim of control, but I've been secretly planning my escape with my ex in a castle in Europe, and before you decide whether to root for me or throw tomatoes, I should introduce myself like a person rather than a plot twist. I'm Lila, 33, a restoration architect who spends her daylight hours persuading old buildings not to give up on themselves. The kind of woman who can read mortar the way other people read tea leaves and who has learned to say things like repointing in a voice that makes donors open their wallets and inspectors put away their pens. The irony of my life is that I stabilize structures for a living while my own foundation has been settling in all the wrong places. People meet me and peg me as reliable, hair always braided like a practical promise, boots sensible enough to climb scaffolding, smile that says I'll bring muffins to the meeting, and plans that actually work. My boyfriend, let's call him Matthew because that is unfortunately his name, liked me like that. He liked that I could schedule a week down to the half hour, liked that my apartment had labeled bins, liked that I answered texts promptly and never once made him wonder whether his message was little bubbled and ignored. He said it out loud once, "You're steady, Lila. That's your superpower." I smiled like it was a compliment instead of a carefully folded box. Control is funny. It rarely arrives with chains. It shows up with reminders and calendars and reasonable suggestions. Maybe don't wear steel-toe boots to dinner, he'd say, and I'd swap them for something feminine that made me walk like I was apologizing to the floor. Maybe don't drink coffee after 4, he'd say, and I'd put a post-it on the machine because I like being easy. Send me your itinerary just so I don't worry, he'd say, and it felt like love to hold my life up to the light so someone else could check for cracks. Over time my world tilted 1 degree at a time, and the marble of me kept rolling where gravity told it to. You don't notice you live in a tilted house until all your waterlines are wrong. Enter the castle, which still feels ridiculous to type, but that's what it is. I was hired for a summer feasibility study on a hilltop fortress outside a town that smells exactly like warm bread and old stone. The locals call it Castello del Stagioni, the Castle of Seasons, because every facade catches a different kind of weather. A prince once lived there, now pigeons do. It has a keep that turns gold at 5 in the afternoon and a chapel where the paint flakes like confetti, and a cistern so deep you can feel your voice fall forever when you speak over it. I was supposed to spend 6 weeks documenting failure. There's comfort in the clinical word, mapping cracks, measuring settlement, tracing moisture like a detective with a clipboard. I did not plan to meet Luca there. Except I did, of course. He was the ex I told myself I'd already filed, alphabetized. Luca, the architecture student who taught me how to fall in love with arches. Luca, the boy who left my life with a T-square and an apology. Luca, now somehow the man overseeing the local contractor team because Europe is a cul-de-sac where history walks its dog every evening. When I walked into the site office, his head bent over drawings, I smelled cedar and dust and a little of my 20s burning. "Lila," he said without looking up, like the room had whispered me to him. When he lifted his face, time turned its chair around. "Of course it's you," he added, and there was that crooked smile that makes order look like a dare. I said all the right professional things. We talked Lime content and load paths and budget constraints. We wore hard hats and the fluorescent vests that make everyone look like a safety angel. But the castle did not care about our attempts at decorum. It flickered at us the way old buildings do when they recognize their people. In the courtyard, pigeons rearranged themselves into coincidental hearts. The wind leaned conspiratorial through the lodges. And at the cistern, when we leaned over together to examine the stone lip, our reflections sat side by side in that black impossible water, and I remembered learning that desire isn't a thunderclap, it's a gradual alignment, a cathedral slowly finding its light. At night I sent Matthew photos, doors, lintels, the view from the ramparts that made even my phone want to write poetry. He sent back questions about my bedtime, my meetings, whether I was being careful, and that "you're my favorite object" tone that used to make me feel held and now made me feel displayed. "You know how you overwork," he'd text. Set an alarm to stop at 6. I would, and then I'd stay an hour late anyway, like a teenager sneaking truth past curfew. Luca and I started doing the thing you do when your heart knows the schedule your mouth isn't ready to circulate. We lingered a beat too long in doorways. We compared pencil brands. We shared a ridiculous reverence for the way afternoon light invents new colors in white plaster. We were not stupid. We were very stupid. One evening, after we'd been measuring the keep all day and I had graphite on my cheek that nobody told me about, the sky decided to be theatrical. A storm rolled in with the seriousness of an orchestra tuning. The crew hurried down the hill. Lightning loves to flirt with anything that thinks it's taller than the sky. But I wanted 5 more minutes, 3 more photos, 1 more justification to be exactly where I shouldn't. Luca stayed because he stays. We took shelter in the chapel where saints with missing faces look forgiving by default. Rain came down so suddenly the world forgot it had ever been dry. We stood in the doorway with the threshold turning into a small river, and I felt my life crisp into 2 options. Tell me not to, I said, surprising myself with how quickly I'd become the kind of woman who needs an external stop sign. Luca looked at me like we were a problem he had been given enough years to solve. He shook his head very slowly. I never tell you what to do, he said, honest enough to be cruel. You're the one who makes plans. You're the one who keeps promises. He paused. What do you want to promise yourself? And I suddenly hated that question for being both generous and accurate. The rain softened, the air did that after-storm exhale, and I could almost hear the castle chuckle. I don't want to be the kind of structure that only stands because someone else is holding it up, I said. He nodded, and in that nod was the language of solved trusses and summer mornings in a city we once loved together and 100 unsent messages. We did not kiss. We did something worse. We made a plan. Escape is a dramatic word. I'm not in a basement chained to a radiator. Matthew does not make threats. He makes spreadsheets. He loves me in a way that counts my breaths. But the kind of control that wraps itself in concern stains you slowly the way smoke does. Everything you own smells like a fire even if you never saw the flames. I realized I had been narrating my life to him in future perfect. I will have sent you the details. I will have checked in. I will have chosen the restaurant you prefer. There is a way to you narrate yourself back to human. It requires a map and an accomplice and the certain kind of courage you discover when you stand under a centuries-old ceiling and realize somebody once trusted the geometry enough to sleep beneath it. The plan started small because small is how you move when big feels like betrayal. I rented a tiny room in a pension near the castle under my middle name, the one only my aunt uses when she's trying to guilt me for not visiting. I told Matthew work had extended by 10 days. It had, technically. Stones do not respect our timelines. I bought a phone that wasn't mine and taught myself how not to exist on it. Luca mapped train schedules like love letters. We met in the castle library, a room that smelled like wormwood and history's attic and traced routes on paper. We practiced telling the truth in fractions. I'm leaving, I'd say to the dust motes. I'm leaving well, Luca would add. I'm leaving alive, I'd say out loud to the frescoed ceiling whose saints had seen enough to nod. I am not proud of the lying, but I want to tell you the small kindnesses I found inside my own cowardice. I started answering Matthew with pauses. I let his calls go to voicemail when I was in the bath, my water, my body that had begun to rejoin me. I stopped sending him hourly photos and only sent him time-stamped sunsets, as if I was slowly reminding him that I inhabited a place where the sky had agency. He didn't like it. Are you okay? He'd text. You feel distant. The old me would have rushed to reassure. The new me wrote, I'm working. It is remarkable how heavy a period feels when you haven't used one in months. When I wasn't mapping exits, I was in love with the castle. It's a good time to tell you that. I love buildings the way some people love pets. I talk to them. I believe they talk back. The keep was tired but proud. The chapel was embarrassed about the state of its frescoes. The kitchen carried 37 recipes in its stones. In the loggia, Swifts made frantic calligraphy at dusk. Every morning the groundskeeper, a woman in her 70s who could lift a marble slab with her bare hands and who wore an apron that said "Don't mess with Nonna," brought me a coffee that tasted like surviving grief. You work like you're trying to outrun something, she said once, and I, who had perfected the art of redirecting, asked her what kind of olives grew best on that hill. She didn't answer. She just kissed the top of my head, which is the sound a blessing makes when it doesn't want to be noticed. Luca and I did not behave. We kissed in the stair turret where the stones spiral like a seashell. We pressed our foreheads together in the North Tower and listened to the wind make promises it couldn't possibly keep. We were careful, no public anything, no cameras, no witnesses except the bats, but also not careful at all because we were building a thing under us that felt load-bearing. He didn't tell me what to do with Matthew, he didn't stage some romantic theft. He looked at me the way a good engineer looks at a wall, with respect for what it's carrying and a plan for how to relieve the loads without dropping anything vital. We set a date, not for leaving really, but for beginning the beginning. The Castle of Seasons would close to visitors for 3 days to allow scaffolders to take down a temporary stair. We would use the quiet to practice living while unobserved. I would move from the hotel under my middle name to the room above Nana's courtyard where vines make a green ceiling. I would spend 72 hours without narrating my whereabouts to anyone whose worry had turned into my leash. Matthew would think I was on a sight retreat, again a truth in a borrowed jacket. If I panicked, the plan had exits like all good plans do, back to the hotel, back to my tidy life, back to being the woman who always has an alibi. The day before our 3-day practice, Matthew arrived unannounced. Surprise is a violation when you've been living by a schedule that kept you safe. He texted me, "Guess who's at the airport?" with 6 champagne glasses, as if travel were a party and not a giant moving assumption. I nearly dropped my calipers. "Business trip to Milan," he said. Couldn't resist a detour to see my girl. I'm at the gate, boarding in 10. My heart tried to leave my body by the emergency exit. "Don't," I typed, then deleted it because a lifetime of being agreeable has muscle memory. "It's not a good time," I tried, and he replied, "That's why I'm coming," which is exactly the logic that turns care into management. I called Luca. I said the words, tasting iron. He didn't curse or pace. He said, "Okay," and that word turned into a scaffold. "We pivot," he added. "You host the man you're leaving. You host him kindly. You don't let him rearrange the furniture in your head." He paused. "We press pause on the castle plan, not stop. Houses wait. So can we." I wanted to marry the calm in his voice. I wanted to punch a cloud. Matthew arrived smelling like the duty-free store and certainty. He looked handsome, which is unfair. He brought me a neck pillow and a little bottle of perfume that said, "For women who know where they're going." I could not decide whether to laugh or set it on fire. He wanted to see the castle, so I took him because hiding would have made me feel smaller, and I am done being pocket-sized. We walked through rooms that had become my organs. He said the right tourist things, "Wow, and this must have been expensive, and you're really in your element." He put his hand on the small of my back to steer me around a puddle as if I've never met water. He asked about safety protocols in a tone that turned concern into critique, and the crew began avoiding him the way you step around a fresh crack to keep from making it wider. Luca kept his distance, professional, invisible, but I felt him like you feel a beam you know is there even if the plaster hides it. I wanted to introduce them the way you want to show your parents the treehouse you built with the neighborhood kids. I wanted to run. Both wants hummed inside me like mismatched transformers. That night Matthew took me to an overpriced restaurant in town. He ordered for us with the confidence of a man who thinks menus are suggestions and women are grateful. He said I seemed different, good different, and I had the indecency to give him some credit. I am different. Not because of Luca, not entirely. Because I put my hands on a castle and remembered that when I'm left alone with stone and sky, I become precise and brave and sometimes rude. I made a plan today, I told him, because this is the one thing he respects. For the next phase. He kissed my knuckles like a television boyfriend. "Of course you did," he said. "That's my Lila." And I felt the little click of something locking that did not belong to him. We postponed the 3-day rehearsal because I can do math. I let Matthew accompany me for 48 hours of work. I let him get sunburned and impatient. I let him stand in the courtyard where I had first realized my life had seams. I let him see the side of me that is unsupervised, hair wild from the wind, face streaked with grime, brain full of angles and rain. He did not like it. He liked the version of me who apologizes to the floor in dainty shoes. You're intense, he said, as if he'd just met a weather pattern he didn't pack for. I'm at work, I said, and the period at the end of that sentence paid cash. He left a day early. Work, he said. Meetings. The last hug on the street was a negotiation. How much of me would go with him? Call me when you land, he said. I'll try, I said. He laughed like I'd made a joke, and I let him keep it because the truest kindness I can offer that man is the opportunity to think I am exactly who he loved. I will not take that away until I have something better to hand him than an apology. We resumed the plan. The castle was quiet and approving, like a teacher who didn't mark the absence because she knew the reason. Nonna's upstairs room felt like a secret my childhood always wanted. Luca brought a little radio that plays only 2 stations, aching love songs and soccer commentary. We cooked simple food. We argued about grout. We pretended the world was only this, a stone sill, a glass of cheap wine, a view that obeys the moon. In the morning we watched Swifts sew the sky back together. In the afternoon we worked. At night we practiced a thing I had forgotten, staying. Not passing through. Not pausing only to count. Staying. You probably want to know the end. I do too. I wish I could tie a bow around the word escape and place it gently on the door. I will tell you the honest part. Escape is not a single run down a hill with a suitcase. It's a daily change in the direction you face. It is waking and not narrating your whereabouts like you owe the world a GPS coordinate. It is picking up the phone and dialing your own number first. I called Matthew. Not to confess like a teenager court. To explain like an adult who has finished choosing. I told him I needed to live a life he did not need to supervise. I told him I loved him because I did, but not in the way that makes a future. I told him the parts of me that make invoices and breakfasts and good conversation would always wish him well, and the part of me that stares into cisterns and listens for water had already left. He said the things men say when their plans are interrupted by human beings. You're making a mistake, and we can fix this, and after everything I've done for you. I let him list his gifts. When he was done, I said thank you because gratefulness is not a contract. Then I said goodbye in my own language, complete sentences, no apologies. After the call, I cried until the stone beneath me felt warm. Nonna put a cup of something medicinal in my hand and said nothing because the right words would have damaged the moment. Luca did not swoop. He is not a hawk or a prince, he is a man who understands roofs. He came upstairs and lay on the floor because that is where the breeze lives. He asked me what I needed. A day, I said. A day of decisions that are only as big as they need to be. We spent it like a pair of careful carpenters. We took measurements of the room we might share. We made a list of groceries that didn't include anyone's preferences but ours. We sketched the keep from memory for no reason except love. We practiced boring intimacy, washing dishes, folding blankets, putting 2 toothbrushes in a cup without making a speech. Maybe that disappoints you. Maybe you wanted chandeliers and a chase scene and a helicopter. I prefer doorways that lead to kitchens. I prefer paperwork that gives me my name back. I prefer a life where a castle is not an escape route but a neighbor. We're writing the rest as we go. I've applied for a year-long contract on the project, officially, professionally, with references from people who think I am sunlight wrapped in scaffolding. I rented the upstairs room under my real name because I am tired of being my own shadow. My family thinks I've lost my mind. They also booked flights. They will come and pretend not to cry at the view. I will show them where the swifts sow the sky and where the cistern keeps secrets and where I found my breath again. Matthew will be okay. He will find someone who appreciates the safety he offers without feeling it as a leash. He will tell a story about the girl who liked old buildings too much, and in his version I will be a lesson and not a loss. I can live with that. Not every narrative needs me to be its hero. What of the castle? It stands there, patient. We removed the worst of the rot. We wrapped the keep in math. In the chapel, I spent an afternoon with a conservator named Fabia, coaxing a saint's hand back from absence. The pigment loosened like a shy confession. She said, "Old paint wants to stay if you ask gently." I thought of my life. I thought of all the colors I let go because the palette was inconvenient. I thought of the word control and how it looks like stability until it starts to smudge your edges. I thought of Luca, who is a man but also a method, a way of approaching weight and weather and fear. At dusk, the castle is exactly what its name promises. The seasons gather there like they are all trying to remember each other. Summer slouches against autumn. Winter takes off its gloves. Spring laughs too loud. I sit on the parapet and put my boots on the wall because I am allowed to scuff my own life. Luca comes up with 2 cups. He hands me one and doesn't ask what I'm thinking because he knows it's probably 6 things at once. We drink. We count swifts. We plan tomorrow's work like what it is, a gift, not an alibi. If you're waiting for permission to leave a room that looks safe and feels small, here it is from a woman with a pencil behind her ear and lime dust in the seams of her fingers. You can love a person and still love leaving them more. You can be steady and still change direction. You can build a plan that doesn't hurt anyone more than necessary and be brave enough to accept that some hurt is the tax for crossing a border between the life you narrated and the life you inhabit. You can stand in a castle and realize the stone isn't the miracle. The miracle is that someone once believed the arch would hold and then walked under it. Tonight the wind is misbehaving in the olive trees. Nonna is yelling at a cat as if it were a senator. The crew is playing cards in the courtyard and accusing each other of crimes against probability. I'm at the window, writing this with a pencil I stole from the keep because I wanted a piece of its patience. In a minute, I'll blow out the candle and lie down beside a man who doesn't need to narrate me to know I exist. The room will creak the way honest rooms creak. The castle will breathe. And for the first time in years I will sleep without checking who I am supposed to be in the morning because I already am her, Lila, 33, restoration architect, not a victim and not a secret, a woman whose escape isn't running away so much as coming home through a door I drew myself and trusted enough to open.